Alright, Falcons fans, we have some big news to share today, and you're definitely going to want to stick around because we're talking about a potential blockbuster move that could shake up this defense and completely change the team's salary cap situation heading into free agency. Before we dive into today's big topic, be sure to hit that like button so you don't miss any updates on the Atlanta Falcons. So here's the deal, NFL analysts have been speculating about what the Falcons could do to free up some much-needed cap space. And now Bleacher Report's Mo Moton has released a bold trade proposal that could send longtime defensive leader Grady Jarrett to the Arizona Cardinals. Yep, you heard that right. One of the most respected and beloved veterans on this list could be on the move, and there's a big reason why. The Falcons are currently over the salary cap by about $5.3 million, which means they have some tough decisions to make before free agency gets going. And while Jarrett has been a cornerstone of this defense over the past decade, his contract is one of the biggest obstacles in the team's efforts to create financial flexibility. If Atlanta were to trade him, they would immediately free up $16.3 million in cap space, money that could be crucial to signing key players at positions of need. Now, let's talk about what Jarrett still brings to the table. Even though he's set to turn 32 in April, he remains a disruptive force on the defensive line. Last season, he suited up for every game, racking up 53 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 18 pressures, and 2.5 sacks. While those numbers might not jump off the page, his presence on the field goes beyond just the stat sheet. He's a leader, a 2-time Pro Bowler, and one of the most respected guys in that locker room. That's exactly why this decision, if the Falcons do decide to move him, wouldn't be an easy one. Jarrett has been a Falcon for his entire career, dating back to 2015 when Atlanta stole him in the 5th round of the draft. Since then, he's been nothing short of a workhorse for this franchise, earning Pro Bowl honors in 2019 and 2020 while also picking up a second-team All-Pro nod in 2019. But here's the reality, his production has dipped slightly, and with a cap hit north of $20 million, it's fair to question whether the team can afford to keep him at that price. If the Falcons were to trade Jarrett, Arizona seems like a logical destination. The Cardinals desperately need help on the defensive front after finishing near the bottom of the league in rushing yards allowed and struggling to create consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Moton's argument is that Jarrett could be a perfect fit to help them shore up their defensive weaknesses while opening up pass-rushing lanes for their second-level defenders. And let's be real, if the Falcons could get a decent draft pick in return, it would be a win-win situation. Now, if you're wondering whether the Falcons should release him instead of trading him, the answer is, it doesn't really make a difference from a financial standpoint. Whether they trade him or cut him outright, Atlanta would still save that $16.25 million. The real question is whether another team would be willing to give up assets in exchange for a player who's entering the final year of his contract. And don't forget, these two teams have a recent history of making deals. Last offseason, Terry Fontenot shipped Desmond Ridder to Arizona in exchange for wide receiver Rondale Moore. Could the Cardinals and Falcons work something out again? It's definitely a possibility. Of course, none of this is set in stone just yet. The Falcons could decide to keep Jarrett for one more season, rework his contract, or move in an entirely different direction. But with Atlanta sitting near the bottom of the league in cap space heading into free agency, something has to give. And if that something turns out to be a Grady Jarrett trade, it would mark the end of an incredible era for one of the most respected Falcons of the last decade. So now it's your turn, Falcons fans, what do you think? Should the team pull the trigger on a trade and free up that cap space, or should they find a way to keep Jarrett around for another season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, Kirk Cousins and the Falcons have been the center of trade rumors all offseason. Since the season ended, we've seen conflicting reports about what's next for both sides. But now, as free agency approaches, the pieces of the puzzle are finally coming together. And if we take a closer look, it looks like the Falcons are playing this situation to their advantage in a way that could actually work for them. The biggest challenge? Cousins' massive contract. The Falcons don't want to release him outright, but trading him at his current salary is nearly impossible. So, what's the move? Convincing Cousins to take a pay cut. And how do they do that? By making him believe it's the only way he gets out of Atlanta. Here's the strategy. The Falcons know they need to move Cousins, but they also know that no team wants to take on one of the worst contracts in NFL history. Their best bet is to make the deal more attractive by reducing the financial burden on any potential trade partner. But getting Cousins to agree to that isn't easy. That's why they're playing the waiting game, applying pressure, and letting the market shape up before making their move. One risk with this strategy is waiting too long. If teams fill their quarterback needs through free agency, a trade, or the draft, the Falcons could find themselves stuck with Cousins. We already saw the Raiders go after Geno Smith instead of Cousins. There were rumors that Las Vegas inquired about him, but apparently Atlanta shut that down. That move sent Geno to the desert, but it also opened up a spot in Seattle, and that's where things get interesting. Seattle's offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, worked with Cousins in Minnesota, and that connection could make the Seahawks a potential trade partner. If they're looking for a veteran to hold things down while they develop a long-term answer at quarterback, Cousins could be a logical fit. But here's the catch: Seattle might prefer to wait and see if the Falcons release him rather than give up assets in a trade. And that's exactly what other teams are thinking, too. Why pay for something you might get for free? This brings us to Cousins' recent meeting with Falcons owner Arthur Blank. According to reports from Albert Breer and Tom Pelissero, Cousins met with Blank to discuss his future. That meeting tells us a couple of things. First, Cousins is looking for answers. He wants to know where he stands. Second, if he went straight to the owner instead of dealing with GM Terry Fontenot and head coach Raheem Morris, that could mean there's some tension behind the scenes. And honestly, that makes sense. The Falcons are trying to move him, and he knows it. But at the same time, he wants control over his next destination. The key date in all of this is March 17th. That's when Cousins is due a $10 million roster bonus. Now, that bonus doesn't hit the books until 2026, but it's still something the Falcons would rather avoid. If they trade him before then, they're off the hook. If they cut him, that dead cap hit jumps from $25 million to $35 million. Not ideal. So, the Falcons are hoping to get a deal done before then. But if it doesn't happen, they might be willing to ride this out into the summer and see if a quarterback-needy team gets desperate. At the end of the day, the Falcons have made it clear they don't intend to release Cousins. They want to trade him, and they're trying to manipulate the situation to make that happen. But will it work? That depends on whether Cousins is willing to play ball. If he refuses to take a pay cut, the Falcons could be stuck. If he agrees, they might actually get something in return for him. And that's why this next week is so critical. So now, it's time to hear from you, Falcons fans. Do you think the team's strategy will pay off, or are they setting themselves up for failure? Should they just cut Cousins and move on, or keep playing the long game to try and get something in return? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for all the latest Falcons updates. Go Falcons!